Frost Death Knight is a fantastic melee, plate weaving, cleaving mini Lich King build. I'm going to show you how to play it as a beginner for Season 4 of Dragonflight with no information overload in a digestible manner. I always like to emphasise the fact that you should try and get a higher and higher eye level of gear and not worry too much about the secondary stats, unless you really know what you're doing. This here is a general priority, and one thing I actually will say is that you should try and stack crit quite a lot. Usually I try not to advise specifically into which stats, but actually as a Frost Death Knight, crit is quite important. However, even with that being said, you should always sim or simulate your character if you want to really know which item of gear is going to be better. Generally, if it's a higher eye level, then this will be the upgrade for you. But it can be really, really fun to delve into the details if you like. For talent trees, this on the left-hand side here is for raiding and single target. The build on the right is for AoE, Area of Effect, and Mythic Plus. Like I said in the intro, Frost Death Knights are fantastic at cleaving and therefore hitting multiple enemies even with their single target rotation. So it's not going to differ too much. There is both of the import strings for these builds in the description, by the way, so that you can put them straight into your game. And I'm not going to go through every single individual talent, again, to keep this digestible without information overload, but I will be talking around all of the core and important ones that make the foundation of Frost Death Knight what it is today. But before we get onto that, let's have a look at some of the unique cooldowns and utility spells we have at our disposal. So we've got the Anti-Magic Zone here. This is a party-wide spell damage absorption dome and damage reducer. And you can use this to protect you and your allies. Again, with Icebound Fortitude, another defensive spell we have, this is quite simply going to reduce damage taken, however, just for you this time. On the bottom hand side, that's not correct. On the bottom of the screen, you can see you've got Lichborn. You're going to get reduced damage taken, increase your leech, and therefore your damage is actually going to leech some health off your enemies and give you some immunities. Another defensive there. We've also got to empower our rune weapon, giving us haste, some runes, and runic power. Haste, of course, increasing our attack, etc. And runes and runic power are the two main resources we use as a Frost Death Knight. We've then got some utilities. Raise Ally is a battle res, and if you're not sure what that means, it's actually where you can resurrect an ally who's died in battle, so still in combat. And this is on a 10-minute cooldown, so do use it wisely, but really can be a get out of jail free card in some nasty situations, like if your healer has accidentally kicked the bucket. We've also got Chains of Ice, a really fantastic mega slow that's going to slow your enemy down. Death Grip, pulling the target towards you. Death's Advance, a movement speed increase for you, and it's actually going to stop you from being slowed as well. Lastly, we have Mind Free. This is your kick, otherwise known as your interrupt. Simply, this is going to be how you are interrupting your enemy's spellcasting. Something really, really important that you do need to get into the habit of even as a beginner. I can tell you for a fact, the groups that you're going to be going with are going to like you a hell of a lot more if you were interrupting the enemy's spellcasting. Even in the higher levels of content, it's still something that a lot of people do not do, and this can really annoy people, and it really does make a difference. So now that we're in game, we're going to start off looking at the single target rotation and then any changes we're going to make, including the talent tree to Mythic Plus and AoE, Area of Effect. You may notice here that my UI is considerably different from yours, my user interface, and that's because I've made it myself using an add-on called ElvUI. It's a very complex add-on. If you do like the look of my UI and would like to get it yourself, you can import this via my Patreon, including the other add-ons that I've customized to make this UI. It's all there for you to import on my Patreon, link in the description for that. Of course, it does also support the channel if you wish to do so. So I do really, really appreciate anyone who does. The other thing on the UI here in the middle is this Weak Aura. Weak Aura is an add-on that does a lot of different things, and you can get individual Weak Auras. This specific Weak Aura is by Luxfoss. It's the Luxfoss Death Knight Weak Aura, and I love his Weak Auras. I think he is fantastic. Description, again, there's a link for that down the bottom. And what this does is it just has all of your cooldowns and resources in one central eye line on your screen. So you can see here we've got our runes. These are our frost runes. We've got 6 of them. And it says 0 here of an empty bar, and that's our runic power, along with all of our abilities and cooldowns, and it will show our buffs as well. So it's all in one central place for you. There are 2 different builds that you can play as a Frost Death Knight. There's the Obliteration build, and then there's the Breath of Sindragosa build. The latter is the one we are going to be going with, Breath of Sindragosa. That's because it's an easier rotation, and therefore for beginners, it's the appropriate one. If you would like me to also make a video on the other one, I'm not sure if there's much appetite for it or not, let me know in the comments below. I'm pretty sure my last Frost Death Knight video for 10.2.5 also was the Obliteration build, so do check that out if you want it. I can't remember which build I showcased last patch, but I think it was the other one. But if you would like an updated one, of course, I'm happy to do so. So these are the spells we're going to be using here. Left to right is the general priority, meaning this is the top priority, this is the lowest priority. And of course, there's a lot of nuances in regards to which ones we're using. So I've just gone up and I've started auto-attacking the enemy, and you can see already one of our spells has procced, and that is Obliterate. If you see that happening, it's this talent here, Killing Machine. Your auto-attack, critical strikes, have a chance to make your next Obliterate, deal frost damage, and critically strike. And that's what that proc is when you see it. It is a guaranteed critical strike. So the first thing we're going to use on our rotation here is Frost Strike. Chill your weapon with icy power and quickly strike the enemy, dealing frost damage. And you can see here that has actually put 2 buffs up on us. And that is Unleashed Frenzy and Icy Talons. Unleashed Frenzy is this one here. Damaging an enemy with a runic power ability increases your strength by 2% for 10 seconds, and that stacks up to 3 times. Icy Talons is over here. Your runic power spending abilities increase your melee attack speed by 6% for 10 seconds, again stacking up to 3 times. So the top priority being Frost Strike. If you see they're about to fall off like they are now, then make sure you're using your Frost Strike to keep these 2 buffs up at all times. That's your top priority. Again, you can see they're about to fall off. Make sure you use your Frost Strike as top priority to keep up these 2 buffs on yourself. Again, that is your top priority. After that, we're going to use our Pillar of Frost. The power of frost increases your strength by 25% for 12 seconds. Each rune spent while active increases your strength by an additional 2%. So you can see abilities like our Obliterate spends 2 runes. Our Howling Blast is going to cost 1 rune. So the more runes we spend, that's these frost runes here, you can see that are recharging. The more runes we spend in that Pillar of Frost window is going to mean that we're getting more strength. The third priority on our list is Breath of Sindragosa, a 2-minute cooldown ability, continuously deal 5,000 frost damage every 1 second to enemies in a cone in front of you. Again, see what I mean? This build is really good at cleaving and therefore hitting multiple enemies. Until your runic power is exhausted, deals reduced damage to secondary targets, generates 2 runes at the start and the end. You want to use this at the third point in your priority list if you have at least 60 runic power. And some of our abilities are going to be generating runic power. You can see here I've got 120 runic power. So we've got above 60, and therefore we want to use our Breath of Sindragosa, as you can see here. And you can see that our runic power is going to be going up, etc., while that is happening as well. At that point, we then want to use our Empower Rune Weapon. It's on a 2-minute cooldown, and we've got 2 charges of it. Empower your rune weapon, gaining 15% haste, generating 1 rune and 5 runic power instantly and every 5 seconds for 20 seconds. If you already know it, you get an extra charge, which we do. So the point in the rotation where we're going to use this here is if we have less than 70 runic power, like we do now, and less than 3 runes. We've actually got 6 at the moment, so we don't need to use that. Then we're going to use Remorseless Winter. It's on a 20-second cooldown. Drain the warmth of life from all nearby enemies within 8 yards, dealing frost damage over 8 seconds and reducing their movement speed. Then, after that, we're actually going to be using our Obliterate. Specifically, if our Pillar of Frost is active, because remember, the more runes we the more runes we spend in that Pillar of Frost cooldown window, the more damage we're going to be doing with our strength. Also use it at this point if you've got the Killing Machine buff. What's the Killing Machine buff? It's the one right now that is making it a guaranteed crit. And that is the one that I spoke about briefly before up here, Killing Machine. After that, in the rotation, we want to use Howling Blast. You can see here, this has got a proc as well, and this is called Rime. Blast the target with Frigid Wind, dealing frost damage to that foe and reduce damage to all other enemies, inflicting them with Frost Fever, a disease that deals damage over 24 seconds and has a chance to grant the Death Knight 5 runic power each time it deals damage. After that, we're going to use our Obliterate even if we're not in Pillar of Frost, and even if it doesn't have the proc from Killing Machine to be a critical strike. We're going to use that at that point. And then if we're not going to waste any runic power, we're going to use our Horn of Winter. Blow the Horn of Winter, gaining 2 runes and generating 25 runic power. Obviously, we wouldn't want to use this right now because we're maxed out and therefore we'd be wasting it. And then lastly, use your Frost Strike. And that is the rotation. So let's just go through that priority list again. We're going to make sure we're using our Frost Strike as a priority to keep our 3 stacks of these 2 buffs up here. We're going to use our Pillar of Frost to do more damage. Use our Breath of Sindragosa. We've got 60 or more runic power. And then we can use our Empower Rune Weapon to get some of that back as that's coming out. Use your Remorseless Winter pretty much on cooldown. Use your Obliterate if it is a critical strike or we're in the Pillar of Frost cooldown window. Use your Howling Blast, especially if it has Rime. Oh, and that's what this is, by the way. Rime is the proc on it. I forgot to actually explain. Obliterate, which is this one, has a 60% chance to cause your next Howling Blast to consume no runes and deal 300% additional damage. So basically, when you see it light up, it's just going to be a super duper version. Then use your Obliterate, even if it's not procced or we're not in the Pillar of Frost cooldown window. Use your Horn of Winter to get your runes and runic power back up. And if you've got nothing else to press, Frost Strike. You may have noticed I haven't spoken about this one, Soul Reaper. You can see there's a big tooltip here, but it's actually a lot simpler than it looks. Strike an enemy for Shadow Frost damage and inflict the enemy with Soul Reaper. It's on a 6-second cooldown. After 5 seconds, if the target is below 35% health, it will explode, dealing additional damage. If the enemy that yields experience or honor dies while affected, you gain runic corruption. TLDR, if the enemy is at 35% health or below, or will be within the next few seconds, use Soul Reaper on cooldown at this point in the rotation, but only if it's at or below 35% health, or will be within the next few seconds. For the remainder and the most of the time you're in the rotation, you can just skip over that, but be aware of that when you do get to the execute phase. And that execute phase does mean at 35% health or below. So again, using our Frost Strike to get our buffs up ×3, go into the Pillar of Frost cooldown, then use your Breath of Sindragosa, not like I have with hardly any runic power, but do it at 60 or above. Use your Empower Rune Weapons to get your runic power and runes back. Use Remorseless Winter on cooldown. Use Soul Reaper when the enemy is at low health. Use your Obliterate if it's in the Pillar of Frost window or if it's got a guaranteed crit. Use your Howling Blast when you've got Rime. That's the proc on there. Otherwise, use your Obliterate if nothing's really happening. Use your Horn of Winter to get your resources back. And if nothing else, press your Frost Strike. And that is literally it. If you are wondering, what do I do in AoE? Well, see this spell here, Death and Decay, corrupts the targeted ground, dealing damage over 10 seconds to enemies within inside it. While you remain within the area, your Obliterate, this one here, is going to hit up to 2 additional targets. Basically, if you're doing damage to multiple different targets, for instance in Mythic Plus, then just slot Death and Decay in the rotation here. Quite literally in between these 2 spells, that's where it comes in the rotation, and that is pretty much it. One other thing to mention is the Ice Cap talent here. Your Frost Strike and Obliterate critical strikes do reduce the remaining cooldown of your Pillar of Frost. This again is your Pillar of Frost, so your cooldown will be reduced when getting crits from your other spells, FYI, something to be aware of there. And also, regarding that crit, it also synergizes with Bone Grinder. Consuming Killing Machine grants 1% critical strike chance for 10 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. At 5 stacks, your next Killing Machine consumes the stacks and grants you 20% increased frost damage for 10 seconds. So again, therefore, we're getting more crit. When we do crits, we're then actually going to reduce the cooldown on our Pillar of Frost. And then when Pillar of Frost expires with the Enduring Strength talent here, your strength is increased by 20% for 6 seconds. So that's after you use your Pillar of Frost. So again, using that Pillar of Frost is really, really important, because even if you think, well, it's only on a short cooldown, a short window, you are getting this benefit as well. The effect lasts 2 seconds longer for each Obliterate And Frost Scythe, we're not using that. Critical Strike during Pillar of Frost. So again, increasing the duration of that increased strength. And that is really it for everything else that I want to talk about in there. I'm just going to switch over to the Mythic Plus build, just so that we can actually see what talents we are changing over. But again, all you're really going to be changing is going to be putting in Death and Decay here. So when we go over to it, there are a few other things that we do get. Abomination Limb. This is another cooldown we get. 2 minutes. Sprout an additional limb, dealing damage to all nearby enemies. Deals reduced damage beyond 5 targets. Every 1 second, an enemy is pulled to your location if they're further away than 8 yards. You gain Rhyme instantly and every 6 seconds after, and that is the proc on your Howling Blast. You can pretty much just use this on cooldown after your Pillar of Frost and Breath of Sindragosa cooldowns. Then you can use your Abomination Limb. Basically, when we're doing as much damage as possible from those cooldowns, then we can use this one. Another one you're going to get, and this is actually going to tie into the set bonus this season, both in single target and Mythic Plus. However, you don't need to take the talent in single target, and I'll explain why in a second. Summons a Frostworm who breathes on all enemies within 40 yards in front of you, dealing damage and slowing their movement speed. Again, you can use that on cooldown. It is on a 3-minute cooldown, but the reason we don't actually take it in single target is because we're going to be getting free ones from the set bonus this season. So what the 2 set bonus this season does is it increases the damage of your Howling Blast. That's this one up here, remember? And Consuming Rhyme, the proc on your Howling Blast here, increases the damage of your next Frostworm's Fury by 5%, stacking 10 times. And this is again from the set bonus, so it is included in single target. And if you're thinking, well, we're not even spec'd into it in single target, well, think again. So the 2 set bonus also makes it that Pillar of Frost will actually call forth a Frostworm at 30% effectiveness that can't actually freeze enemies, but it will do the damage. So when you use your Pillar of Frost, it is going to be calling those forth, and therefore we're going to be getting the increased damage from the passive ones we're already generating. The 4 set then causes those Frostworms, whether it's the passive ones or the ones we're using ourselves in Mythic Plus, the Frostworm's damage to our enemies causes them to take increased damage from our critical strikes. And remember a minute ago we spoke around the talents here about critical strikes and how important they are, etc. And hence why in the stat priority we are stacking a lot of critical strike as a Frost Death Knight in Season 4. And that is it. You've officially learned how to play Frost Death Knight in Season 4 of Dragonflight. It's quite a simple build, this, really, once you get used to it. And I would say that the other build is a lot more complex, as is Unholy. I have got an Unholy guide. If you would like to see it, you can click this playlist here. And I have got a beginner one, as I said, for Season 4 of Dragonflight for Unholy. And I will be doing Blood as well. So check the playlist for those in case you are interested in those specs. Again, if you'd like my UI or anything like that, you can join my Patreon. Just link in the description for that. And you can also join the Discord if you need any help from our friendly community. We're here to especially help beginners. So, there's no question too big or too small. And then apart from that, have fun and good luck in Season 4 of Dragonflight.